Good afternoon. It is afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Empowering Pastors and Leaders. We do that because we believe in marketplace ministers. We believe that the men and women of God who might not be behind the pulpit every Sunday, they have a pulpit that God has placed them in to be able to share the gospel and fund the gospel and to be able to accelerate Jesus coming because more people are getting saved. Today's a very exciting day because we're right on beckoning on Thanksgiving. And it's very interesting in the house here at his tabernacle, all the Bible school students went home, so it's kind of echoey in the hallway. We still have one gentleman right here, but he's local. And it's very interesting not having the Bible school students here. I am going to today, my son, Pastor Cody Spencer, who God has used in a powerful way. He has a youth ministry that every single week is between 100 and 125 teenagers, and as well as God's used for great connections all over the United States. He's going to be sharing some principles with you. Sadly, I have to leave. My mother just called me, and she was in an accident, so I'm going to go see my mother and calm things down there. So just keep my mind in your prayers. So here's Pastor Cody Spencer, and he'll come and do leadership with you this morning. She right up the road? Yeah. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Well, normally you hear my voice, or you see my voice if you're watching online in the chat section. But I don't think anybody's going to be watching that today. So, Todd, don't worry, we can review them, and we will make sure we find you. He's our normal commenter on there. Todd Moss, I love him so much. But I've been able to watch ministry for the last 26 years growing up in a pastor's house. Zach has done the same thing. And it's actually really exciting to be able to watch and see the mighty things that have happened. But then also, it's really sad on the flip side to unfortunately see some of the things that haven't happened, that you know God wanted to happen. You know that someone was supposed to take this massive step, but something just didn't. It's almost like they got hamstringed. You've ever been watching, I remember watching some horse races on ESPN after they'd happened. I think horse racing is kind of boring. But I remember watching them, and sometimes one of the front-running horses would get like a hamstring issue, or they'd twist an ankle, or something would stop them from going to their full potential. And I've seen a lot of leaders get hamstringed by multiple things. And two of them, and I'm not a super expert on them, I'm 26 years old, but I've got some understanding, and I want to share that with you today. Some of my understanding from what I've seen growing up in a pastor's house. Actually, I've been on staff for 8 years this coming May, which is really exciting. We've been running our Uproar Conference. We're going on our 7th year, which is also really exciting. And I've just seen a lot of things. And I don't want people to get hamstringed, because when you get hamstringed, I've seen it will hit their potential and their passion. And that's really, really sad to see in the body of Christ. So the first one I want to start off with is our expectations versus our experiences. On my honeymoon, we went to an absolutely wonderful place to eat down at Miami Beach called Shuckers. It was really, really good the first time that we went. I had a great view of my wife and the inside harbor. It was beautiful all around. The fish was amazing. We had an awesome, awesome experience. And we went back down maybe like 2 or 3 years later. I was preaching at a conference, and it was only like an hour away. Let's go to Shuckers. We love that place. And I looked up, and actually their deck had collapsed. And everyone online was saying that after the deck collapsed, like the food had gone, it had also collapsed. But it was crazy because we went and our expectation was great. Our last experience was awesome. And we formed our expectation based on our last experience. And we got there, and it was everything that Yelp said it was. It had collapsed. It was awful. Poor atmosphere. The owner was like cussing a couple tables away from us. And we were really disappointed because our first experience gave us a great expectation. And really, I think that's a good and a bad thing at times. I've seen that sometimes expectations can be lowered to experiences. And I think that's really the death of expectation. is when we lower our expectations based on our experiences. We've had this happen before where we'll get into inertia. And if anybody's been in ministry or in business for any amount of time, we'll get into a flow of what's already happened. Anybody experience that? Where even on Thursday sometimes, I was telling the leadership team a couple weeks ago, look, whatever's happened the last 6 months, that's great. But our expectations can't be on our experience of the last 6 months. If that's the case, then we'll have half the kids worship and a couple kids will get saved, praise God. But if that's what our expectations are, then how can we ever see anything greater? How can we really use faith to go to the next place, the next step, the next level? And it's easy to get to that spot, isn't it? Well, last time I failed. Last time it didn't work how we thought it would, or I didn't get the return on my investment, or it was more work than I originally signed up for. We will take whatever our experience was oftentimes and then place our expectations right there. And I really think that's how we see death of an organization. When we stop having our expectations up here and we say, well, the last couple months we've seen this, so worship was good, but I don't know how much farther it could go. I don't know how much better it could be. Or the word was good and I have an expectation for a good word, but I don't really have more because that's my experience lately. Or maybe you made an investment and said, well, in the past, my experience has been this and my expectation is about the same. And some of those things are good to measure by, but I think what it does is it actually creates stagnation. Because if we don't have expectations that are above what happened last time, then we're never going to really see growth. And we know that growth is through faith, is through expectations. And when there's not growth, there's stagnation. That's how swamps are formed. There's no growth, there's no movement, and then the death starts to sink in, it starts to grow in. But unfortunately, one of the things I've seen hamstrings many leaders is they stop having great expectations and they stop moving in great faith. And they start moving on their current experiences or their last experiences. And in some cases, that's good because you can measure where you are. But if that's the amount of faith that we have, it's not faith at all. Yeah. We know it's impossible to please God without faith. Literally impossible. And I believe if our faith is measured by our experiences, then we're not really operating in faith at all. In fact, we're slowly dying. We're slowly moving in the wrong direction because if we're not seeing growth, we're seeing just stagnation. And stagnation, we know people will start to fall off because passion dwindles. When things get swampy, one of the first things to go is passion. When business gets swampy and it's hard, one of the first things to go is passion. When we see the same people every Thursday, every Sunday, every Wednesday, it's easy for passion to start to leave. And after passion, we know that our purpose can get really foggy. It's really easy to get foggy in our purpose when our passion is gone. Well, I'm not really feeling passionate about preaching, or I'm not feeling passionate about going and getting more customers or retention of people or retention of customers, and I just don't have a passion for it, so maybe God's calling me in a different direction. We've all heard it. We probably all thought it before. And ultimately, when we don't have passion and we've lost our purpose, it will repel people. People want to be around a place that is full of passion and is also full of purpose. They don't want to go somewhere that has no passion and no purpose. You can find that anywhere else in the world. But a godly business, a business that's rooted in faith, a church that's really rooted in faith and in their purpose, that should attract people. It shouldn't repel. It should attract every single time. And I really think that's the danger of lowering our expectations to our experiences. We do it with restaurants. We do it with our experience on Time Warner Cable when we call in, Spectrum now. We have those things. And unfortunately, I think it creeps into our expectations and what God's going to do through us and in us and around us as well. And that's a really scary place to be in. Our experiences are not a determination on what God will do. And it can't determine our level of faith. And if there's a really easy way to tell where you're at, if it always feels like it should be, then it's showing that you don't have greater expectations. If you go on a normal Sunday, if you're a pastor and you're preaching, and your normal Sunday, and you get up there and you're like, man, we're all done. That's exactly how it should have felt. And I don't think that we're actually having greater expectations. I think that we've slipped into experience because our past experience said that's how it should be. But if we're operating in expectations, we're literally saying, well, the target was up here. It was a little bit higher. If we feel like we accomplished everything, are our expectations really growing? And I don't know if they are. If we get up every week or we run our business every week and every single time we hit our expectations, I think maybe it's funny because sometimes you'll see people who look like they're crushing it. They are absolutely a rock star in that organization. But if you do some research, I feel like a lot of the times I've seen that with some of the people I work with. You start looking into what they're actually doing, and they put the bar so low, it just looks like they're crushing it. I think if we always hit our expectations, we've actually lowered our bar so we look like we're crushing it. So we look like we're seeing growth. So we look like we're actually accomplishing great things. I really don't think it should ever feel like we thought it should have. I think we should get there, and my goodness, God did something crazy, and I didn't know that's how it was going to feel. I didn't know that's how it was going to be, but he did it. Let's look at the Bible example of this. David and Goliath, we find this in 1 Samuel chapter 17, right? We got the Israelites on one side, the Philistine army on one side with Goliath, and Goliath's coming out for 40 days, taunting God's army. They're all scared to death. He's a champion. Dude is like 10 feet tall. He's bigger than Shaq. I couldn't imagine trying to fight Shaq, who was trained in war, with a massive spear, with a massive, like everything he needed to have a great victory. And he scared the Israelite army every single time. But he got David now. It's like, we're all running back. And he stands up and he says, even before he stood up, his brothers doubted him, right? Like, no, go home, David. Stop. The king is like, well, put this armor on. It'll be the... All of these things happened. All these things came into play. Goliath mocked him. But really, what was his expectation then? Obviously, his expectation was to see Goliath fall, was to see God reign supreme inside of that. But I think what happens oftentimes is in business and in ministry and whatever we're doing, we see a Goliath and we're saying, well, last time when I tried to attack the Goliath, last time when this happened, the last time it didn't really work out. Or the flip side is, well, I've never really fought Goliath. I'm not a warrior. We use these excuses of last time or I never have. But we know David had an expectation. He stood up and he said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? It's just a bold statement. A war hero bigger than Shaq, and he's talking garbage. His expectations were so high. But if he was operating on the experiences of everyone else around him, he would have ran back to the tents just like they did every other day. And that's unfortunately how a lot of people lower their expectations based on experiences. But David, he was completely opposite. He stood, he said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? He goes out and collects his stones. He walks out, and we know the rest of the story. He chucks that stone, hits him in the middle of the head, will continue it past, and then he cuts his head off, and he's holding it up. Like, we literally have the victory today as the other army is sprinting in the opposite direction. But I really think that there's a power in unrealistic expectations, because that was completely unrealistic. There was nothing that David could have actually done on his own without God. And I really believe in my heart that godly leadership, any real leadership is godly. And whether you're running a godly business, whether it's ministry, any leadership is based in godly principles. And I think the biggest one that we have to have in leadership is faith. If we're not operating in true faith, how can we see God do more than we could ask, think, or imagine? We'll never see him exceed those things if we're just going on our experiences. If we're praying before God, well, God, my last experiences were this fell through and this fell through and this person wasn't honest and this didn't happen, but this person was pretty decent, and I just pray that it's a little bit better than our last experiences. That's how I think a lot of people end up praying over long term once they've been hamstringed multiple times, where they feel like they're off to the gate, but something happened, an experience happened, and they stop working on expectations. They stop really living in faith, and they just kind of run with what has happened in the past. It requires faith. Faith will make us find our limits every single time. Unrealistic expectations will push us absolutely to the brink of everything that we can do. Like, think about Abraham, about to sacrifice his son. That was everything he could have done. Moses, coming back and standing in front of Pharaoh. That was everything he could have done. Multiple examples through the Bible. Unrealistic expectations or actual faith would push them farther than they would have ever went to find what was really inside of them and then see God do the rest. Another thing that the power of unrealistic expectations will do is it will make us stretch to who God has really made us. I think if we're just going on experiences and where our comfort zone is, we'll never actually stretch to who God has made us to be. I guarantee all of us in this room, God has more, even today, than we could ever imagine, placed inside of us. But if we just go on what's already happened and what we've seen in the past and the issues and the struggles that we've had, and God, I just want a little breakthrough, and we just want to see Goliath leave us alone. We'll fight the whole army. We'll go army and army. God, it's okay. We don't really want to defeat. If that's how we do it, then we'll never actually find out who God has made us to be or what he has for us to be. And it will allow us to reach places that we never honestly expected. There's power in unrealistic expectations or a godly kind of faith. And I think we all have to stretch those. I think consistently we have to stretch those. If we have great expectations of ourselves, I have wild expectations on what I want to see. But I also believe that we need to continuously stretch those. And we can see that happen with two really simple questions. One, was that my best? Yes or no? Did I truly give God everything that I had in that moment based on godly expectations, based on godly faith? Yes or no? And we can only answer that. I was saying earlier with the people who set the bar low so they look like they're doing an amazing job, when they have to answer that to themselves, they have to say no because they know they actually have much more to offer the organization. Was that truly my best? And the second one is, do I like my best? And if we don't like our best, then man, it's time to get to work and to apply faith. It's time to really dig in. And no one really likes to talk about it, but real growth is painful and it's frustrating. It's not fun. It is a pain to really see growth. It is a pain to wake up at 4:30 in the winter when it's cold and you don't have an automatic start on your vehicle, to go to the gym, to work extremely hard. It is frustrating. It is a pain. But if you see that there's more inside of you, it's worth the stretch. I love how Jesus said it in John chapter 15, verse 2 for this. He says, in every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because the word which I've spoken to you abide in me and I in you. It's really cool when you start to truly grow in your faith, in the things of God, in who you actually are, and what he's called of you. And we know some people are called to business. Some people are called to a pulpit. Some people are called to raise a family. But when you truly stretch and see true growth inside of who God has made you to be, it's really cool because he'll start to prune things out of your life so you can become even greater, so you can become even more fruitful in his eyes and for his kingdom and for the calling that he's placed on our lives. But what I've seen is when people start getting pruned, they'll mistake it for punishment. They'll see things removed out of their life. There'll be another level of discipline that is required out of them. And they'll start to throw a fit because that level of pruning is mistake for punishment. But God's not punishing you. He's literally saying, I'm preparing you to handle, to facilitate more. I'm working things out inside of you so you can accomplish greater and larger things. Please don't mistake pruning for punishment. And maybe sometimes it is some punishment. Sometimes we got to get spanked and set in the right direction from heaven. But those who've been corrected the most can rise to the highest level.
There you go.
If you can't be corrected, you can't really go anywhere. And those who get up the most will stand the longest. There needs to be, honestly, there needs to be a gap between where we are right now and our expectations. If where we are right now and our expectations are on the same level, we will fall into stagnation. We will see our purpose get absolutely flooded. We will start to see people repel because we're not really living in faith. If where we are right now and our expectations are on the same playing field, eventually they will decrease together based on our experiences. But on the flip side of saying, you know what? Truly here's my best right now. And my expectation is up here. Not my experiences. Maybe my experiences are way down here. It has been awful. But my expectations are up here. And it's going to require godly faith. And I really got to go to this next place. This gap is one of the best places to live in. Because if you can live in this gap, you're living a life of faith. You're really living a life of, I'm being stretched by God. I'm being challenged to go to greater levels. It requires more discipline, a greater level. I'm not going to shrink. I'm not going to have my purpose forgotten. But instead, I'll see growth inside of this. Paul said, I press toward the upward call of Jesus Christ. There's always more upward that we can go. There's always a higher upward. I think it was Pastor, he was talking a couple weeks ago during this class. He said when they'll climb the very, very tall mountains, what will happen is they'll have to go to a certain elevation and wait and stay there. And once they're adjusted, they'll then go to the next elevation and the next elevation. And they said that what they find is a lot of people will go more than halfway, but then they'll be comfortable and they'll go back down the mountain. It's the same principle. Here's where we are. Here's the next elevation. We got to close that gap. And once you get there, you can't stay there. God, what is the giant? What is the thing? What is the expectation? Where is it you want me to go? What are the things that you're going to prune out? What is it? When we get to the next place, the next level, that next plateau, and keep growing. But without this, we're really on our way to mediocrity. Because if we're in business, there's always going to be another business who's going to keep jumping for that next level. Even in ministry, there'll be another church that's jumping for the next level that'll be attracting people. Not that we're fighting over people, but there'll always be something that's going to the next place and the next level while we're staying mediocre. I don't want to be mediocre. I don't even just want to remain good. I don't even want to remain great. I want to be world class in everything that I do. Because if that's what God has placed inside of me, that's what I want to accomplish. But if my experiences determine who I am and what I'll do, then those expectations won't be there. Instead, it's that same, get out of bed, I'll go through my routine, I'll go to the office, I'll do what I got to do, take care of what I got to take care of, and I'll go home. That's not what it's about at all. But a lot of people have been hamstrung because of their experiences and they've stopped living by faith. What is it that God's spoken to you? He's saying, look, you need this faith because it's a spiritual principle. That's what forces growth. You can have some growth by setting up more discipline, and you can have some growth by reading some books and changing up your schedule. But the true growth is going to come through the spiritual principle of faith. Period. I love how the Amplified Version says it. It's really cool. It says, Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is the assurance or the title, the deed or the confirmation. Faith is the deed of the things hoped for. It says in parentheses, divinely guaranteed. Faith is the deed for those divine guarantees. in the evidence of things not seen, or the conviction of their reality. It says in the rest of the parentheses, faith comprehends as fact what cannot be experienced by the physical senses. Man, imagine everybody in the Bible if they just went on their experiences. Well, Pharaoh's really, really stubborn. He'll never let them go. Well, we walked around the walls of Jericho 6 times. Nothing happened. I don't know what's going to happen on the 7th day. We've already had these experiences. Well, God, there's an ocean, and there's an army behind us. I'm not sure what. I don't know, God. What's the difference between them and us? We got to have great expectations of God, and we got to activate faith. I love verse 2. Like, no one ever reads Hebrews 11, verse 2. But it's cool because it says, for by it the elders obtained a good testimony. By faith, they obtained what we talk about even today. By their faith, a sea was split, walls fell, all of these things happened. So if they obtained a good testimony by faith, I believe we can also obtain a great testimony by faith. But it's never going to happen if we're just going on experiences, what's already happened, what we've seen in the past, and that it'll never happen because we'll just go through motions. But if we're consistently saying, you know what, I have a great expectation. I've heard it from God. I know what he said. I know what he's spoken. I'm going to continue to strive there. I don't care what's happened in the past. I don't care what I've seen. I don't care what the experiences are. I know that for it, the elders obtained a good testimony. And I'm going to operate in the same way that they do. I think the first key in faith is speaking it. David stood up and said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? He spoke out. It came out of his mouth. We know life and death are in the power of the tongue. But that wasn't the only thing that he did. We can't, as leaders, as business owners, as influencers, we can't just speak it out and think that's the fulfillment of faith. That's not true at all. You can't stand up and say, 100 more people will be here next week. 1 million more people will be here. 1 million more will be in the business next month. That's great. That's the start of faith. It really is. What you declare, I believe, is the start of faith. But it's not the finishing of faith. Because David, what he did is he spoke it, but then he went and he collected 5 stones. He actually put it to action. He didn't just speak it. He put it to action. He grabbed these 5 stones and he walks out and he takes one and he's whipping it around his head and lets that sucker fly. That's true faith. I really believe that the fulfillment of David's faith was when he let that stone go. Let me explain. You're like, well, I could have some theological. Probably could. But I really believe that moment was the moment of faith because that's when he let every experience go and put his full expectation into God. There was nothing he could do at that point. Absolutely nothing he could do. I believe real faith is doing everything that you can do and then taking steps in which only God can fulfill. That's right. You want 100 more people next week? Do only what you can do. Go and contact 1,000 people in the neighborhoods around you. Speak out that you'll have 100 more and then see what God will do. If you want another 1 million, I really believe you speak it out and then you do everything that you can do and watch God fulfill the rest. And also, I think really in the church realm, our visions most of the time are just a competition against another church or another person or something like that. Well, if they're going to have 1,000 people every Sunday, we'll have 1,300. That's the vision I heard from God. We know Habakkuk 2 says, write the vision, make it clear, post it. But it's really cool because if you look at Habakkuk 2, 1 through 3, it actually lays out how to hear vision from heaven, how to hear the expectations from heaven, how to let go of the experiences. Because the Israelites, the Hebrew nation, they were a mess. You go through their experiences, they didn't deserve God to do anything. But the expectations, so cool. The first thing in Habakkuk 2, he says, I will stand my watch. If you want true expectations from heaven, you got to stand your watch, or you got to have a meeting with God. The second one, he said, I will watch to see. Not only you set your meeting, you got to look. You got to seek God out. Search him out in this thing. And then he said, he will say to me, speaking of God, God will say to me. So we got to meet, we got to look, and we got to listen for what God's going to say. And after he speaks, he says, write the vision. We got to keep that written down. But it's not a competition. Our expectations in actually operating in faith and seeing God fulfill things is not done by looking at the person up the street and saying, well, they got that many, I'll have this many. Well, this business can do this, I'll do this. Because ultimately, what if you're putting a dampener on God? What if you're like, well, they have 1,000, I want 1,200. God said, I was going to give you 10,000 just by being faithful to me. But you're just going to shoot for 1,200. Or maybe he's saying, you know what, maybe I only want you to have 600, but you're going to launch 600 pastors into the world, and the impact that they'll have is mighty. Right. But if we're not meeting, looking, and listening, we'll come up with our own thing and run our own race and our own vision, and that's when we'll experience the experiences. And we'll stop living by true godly expectation. Your faith should determine your expectations. Your faith should never be based on your experiences. Your experiences should never determine your expectations. Those should all be from heaven. Because true leadership is supernatural at its very core. And people have had great success without leadership being supernatural. Amazing success. Could never take that away. But imagine how much more God had past their natural abilities. Here's what to do with expectations. Some people, they're escaping expectations. By that I mean, you know what God has said and you're just okay with your schedule. Some people, they'll embrace them. Man, this is where we're going. This is great. And that's good. But really, when we see great successes, when we shoot to exceed them, God, I know that you've called me to do this. I want to do this and even more. I want to do this and I want to go even beyond what you've asked me to do. I want to see your kingdom grow. I want to see this business grow. I want to see these people flourish. I don't want to just go to there. I want to go far beyond, because I know that more than I can ask, think, or imagine is what you have. I want to go even beyond it. And we can deal with the expectations. There's 3 ways you can change them. You can create them by spending some time in God, or you can clarify them. But I really believe that one of the greatest ways I've seen leadership hamstrung is by leaders starting to live by experiences and not the expectations from heaven. What is the vision God gave you? That's why you started what you're doing. What did he tell you at the get-go? What are those dreams that he placed in your heart when you said, you know what? I haven't seen those things yet. I'm not sure about them yet. I don't know. This is the things I've experienced. Have you taken your expectations and lowered them to the level of your experiences? If so, it's a really dangerous place to be. Habakkuk 2, it says, it will come to pass. It will come to pass. If you have a vision from heaven, an expectation from heaven, it will come to pass. And I really believe that if we're going to continue to see growth in the kingdom, if we're going to continue to see businesses grow in a godly sense, if we're going to see youth ministries grow, we're going to see anything grow, it's not by our experiences, but it's on our expectations that are bound in faith. That's one way I've seen leaders hamstrung, is they stop truly living in faith and they just kind of go through motions. And it will repel people every time. The second thing I've seen a lot is not enough leaders give people an opportunity. I took a lot of this from Craig Rochelle, who is absolutely phenomenal leadership mind. He runs Life Church, which I think has anywhere from like 70 to 90,000 people on a Sunday. It's insane. You imagine the amount of people you'd have to empower to fulfill such a workload. It's really cool because he was teaching on creating an empowered culture. It's really powerful teaching once you get into it. He says one of the greatest examples of empowering leadership is Jesus and his disciples. He identified a dozen men who he spent years developing and empowering, and then told them, go change the world. I think a lot of leaders have failed and hamstrung what God has for them because they haven't empowered enough people. A lot of leaders are trying to find the right strategy, but the best leaders are obsessed with empowering the right people. And if we empower the right people, the strategy is going to get blown out of the water. Like, look at the disciples. He invested into the right people. He empowered the right people. And because of them, we're sitting here 2,000 years later. It's actually, we'll talk about it at a different time. To empower people, we need to give them clarity and trust. Two easy things. Clarity and trust. I'm going to try to write things on the board. Don't pick on me if it's crude. Why did I write church? Too concerned about my handwriting. Clarity. If you can add clarity and trust together, you'll always have an empowered person underneath of you. But if you give them clarity and no trust, they'll have fear. How many times have you operated well under fear? Not often. Clarity without trust will honestly produce inaction. Well, I have these plans, but I was scared that if they weren't good, that I was going to get in trouble. And I thought that it would work, but I'd rather, I never did it because I was scared. Fear will cripple production every single time. If you have clarity and no trust, the very root that it will produce is fear. If you have trust without clarity, it's probably one of the most frustrating things ever. You have a leader you're working under. They say, I trust you. Now go and do it. What do you want me to do? I'm not even sure what you're asking of me. It's a really good way to push strong leaders away. Also, work without direction creates frustration. Work without direction will always create frustration. Also, buy-in without direction will always cause frustration. If you have clarity and no trust, it produces fear. If you have trust and no clarity, it will just waste a lot of time. Clarity ensures that your team members' work is aligned with your goals and your mission. And trust is the necessary net that results in risk-taking. If you want anybody in your organization to operate on expectations and not experiences, they have to have trust. Why would they take a risk if they think they're going to get fired? Why would they take out and really operate in faith if there's no job security inside of that? Why would they take that massive step towards the godly thing that you're putting your faith towards the expectation from heaven, towards the vision from heaven, if they think they'll be fired because of it? Probably not going to happen. Job security is a pretty big thing. But I mean, long term, it'll hurt worse because, well, you can't grow this ministry, you can't grow this business, so we got to search elsewhere so we can see forward progress. We have to give people trust. When your team members have freedom to fail, they have freedom to experiment. And we know that Man, experimenting produces some amazing things. Some probably really bad things, but also some amazing things. It's great when I'm cooking a meal because I got one person to please, and that's Mindy. The kids, just eat it. Be quiet. And she trusts me to put out some good things. Now, one time, I made spaghetti. Don't judge me. Don't. Okay? You judge me. This is your homework. If you judge me, you owe me $25. I made spaghetti, and I was like, you know what? I'm bored of just having regular spaghetti. So I started like sniffing all the spices in the door of the refrigerator. Has anybody else done that? Like, yeah, that'll be good. No? Okay. No one else has done that. Okay. Must be a family thing. But I'm sniffing through. I'm like, this would be interesting. And I only put like two tablespoons in of mustard. It smelled like it would taste good. I don't know. I shot my shot. She took like 2 bites. She's like, what did you put in this? I was like, nothing. It's just whatever came in the bottle. What did you put in this? Just a little bit of mustard. How much mustard? Just a little bit. Just like a little squirt. Maybe 2 little squirts. Just a little bit. That was a fail. That was a failed experiment. But the amount of experiments I've had that have actually turned out decent in the kitchen far outweigh my mustard mishap. And the same thing will happen within your organizations. Yes, there will be failures. Yes, things won't work out. But I truly believe if people are not scared to fail and they experiment and they try new things and they're also operating in this cool thing called faith and they're having meetings with God and they're hearing from God, it's not even so much an experiment. It's just a new strategy from heaven. But if they're scared because there's no trust, it will never happen. It will never move forward. I also don't think that we find great leaders. I think that we build them. We build great leaders, and then we empower them and let them lead. We don't find them. We build them, empower them, and let them lead. And most people don't actually ever get to this place because they just delegate tasks. The best leaders will delegate authority. When you delegate tasks, you create followers. When you delegate authority, you create leaders. When you delegate authority, you're actually giving a person an opportunity to grow. When you tell them exactly what to do, you're controlling them. And here's the reality. You can have control or you can have growth. But you can't actually have both of them at the same time. You can have control or you can have growth, but you can never actually have both. One of the great questions I've found inside of this, and Grace has actually been my experiment. She does some admin stuff for the youth ministry and then really a bunch of other things and crushes it in worship every Sunday. But it's really cool because when she first came into the office, I said, you know what, I'm going to try this. I'm really going to try to empower her to go far beyond just an administrative role. All right, here's what's going to happen. Grace, here's the clarity on the position. And I want you to know that I trust you to get it done. If I hired you because I believe you can crush this and you'll do an amazing job at it. I gave her clarity and trust. And then she started asking me questions. Well, how do you want this done? Well, how do you want this done? Well, what do you want me to do with this? And there's really an amazing question that I found, or answer that I found. You decide. I gave you the authority to do it. You decide. I don't really care how you do it as long as it's done well, it's understandable, and it produces the right results. You decide. I don't care. And it's crazy because Grace doesn't even realize it, but she runs probably more than half of the youth ministry we do here. All by clarity, trust, and that awesome answer of you decide. You choose. How many things have not worked that you've tried? Decent amount?
Yeah, quite a few.
Is it far outweighed by the things that have been productive, though?
No, I don't think so. I can't even remember all the things I've failed.
When you give people trust, when you give them clarity, they'll make things go farther than you could ever have your hands into the whole way. If your hands are so far into everything, then why even have the other people around? What's the point of having them if you're technically doing all of it and they're just typing some words on a screen for you? Clarity plus trust will allow people to be empowered, and empowered people will take it farther than you ever could have. If you empower the right people, there's no limit to what the organization can accomplish. But if you don't empower the right people, you are the limiting factor in your organization. The strength of your organization is not a reflection of what you control. It's a reflection of who you empower and trust. We're just, as a staff, we read Youngie Cho's book on home cell groups. And this man was at 2,400 people in his church, and he got almost deathly sick for 10 years. And he knew the only way to take it to the next level to see true growth was to empower people. And he empowered the women of his church to start running cell groups in their homes, 15 families, and then they'd split. That church, through cell groups, went from 2,400 people to almost 700,000 people at its height. Wow. Because he empowered the right people. He would have never been able to do that on his own. Actually, the doctors looked at him and said, "You have to quit ministry." He said, "Well, can't I just take like a pill or something?" He said, "The amount of stress it's causing you, no pill can help or solve." And that was doing it on his own to get 2,400 people. But by empowering people, they had a ministry of almost 700,000, which is insane. I really believe that one of the things that's hamstring great leaders and great vision from heaven is that we're scared to empower people. Will people fail? Yes. Will at times we pick the wrong people to empower? Sure. Will sometimes we see loss from that? Yeah. But what other way is there for exponential growth other than empowering people to fulfill their call and their purpose as well? I'm not sure if there is. I have a couple questions in here. As a leader, which do you need to improve most? Communicating clearly or extending trust? If it's communicating clearly, make sure you know what you want and then communicate it. So if you don't communicate, if it's communication, I think a great question we can tell, or a great level of clarity we can bring to our staff is what the most important win your organization needs in this season. I think what we can communicate to people to bring clarity is the most important win we have right now is fill in the blank for your own organization. The thing we're focusing on most right now in this time, in this season, in these next months is this. Here's the clarity in the direction that we're going. If it's extending trust to people, ask yourself these questions. 1, why am I holding back? 2, are my standards too high? I think sometimes we hold standards so high that we can't even keep them. And we look around like, well, they could never do it. You can't even do it. The third question is, do I really believe I'm the only one who can do things right? I lied, I have 2 more questions. Fourth question, am I threatened by good leaders? Because if you're threatened by good leaders and that's why you won't empower them, that's a personal thing that needs to get figured out quickly. And then the fifth one is, what needs to change in me to better trust my team? But I really believe that these two principles of that I've seen hamstring a lot of leaders. They'll stop operating in faith, or they'll just try to do everything on their own, and they'll stop empowering people. I really believe that these are two ones I've seen that are massive. And it breaks my heart because the richest place in the entire world is the graveyard. I don't want to bring the best of me to the grave. I want to leave the best of me right here, right now. And that's never going to happen by me operating on my experiences. It will never be accomplished if I just go through the motions of what I've experienced. And yeah, it's good, but I'm not sure. Like, conference last year was awesome. Great experience. I have like triple the expectations this year. Because I know what God has spoken. I know what he said. But if not, we'll have the same amount. We're okay. We're doing a good work. Eventually, it'll dwindle and die. The other one is really simple. Am I actually empowering people? You look at every massive organization, they've empowered people. Not delegated tasks, they've delegated authority to people. I think we honestly need to delegate authority to people and watch them bring it farther than we ever could. Watch them go far beyond what we could accomplish on our own. Like, if you're in ministry, how many people could you actually minister to yourself this week? How many people could you actually do? Imagine 10 people. What could they do? They'll far outproduce you every time. Every time. And if you have people on your team like, well, they're just not doing it. They're failing. They're not good. Have you given them clarity and trust? Have you actually given them true clarity inside of it? And have you actually empowered them with trust to fail? Do they know that if they fail, they're not going to get fired this time? Unless it's like, there should probably be some parameters in there if you're in business. You lost me $1 million. I'm sorry. That experiment was touch far. But if you operate in faith, not experiences, I believe that you'll be stretched and people will be stretched. You'll live in that gap of faith and always see increase. And I believe that when you empower the right people, they'll go far beyond you could ever go on your own. And honestly, I think they'll bring that big expectation that you have from God. I think they'll close the gap even faster. But at the end of the day, it all requires faith. It really does. One of the things I've seen time and time again, one of the things that I think is dangerous, even about meetings like this, and I love our senior pastor, I love Pastor Spencer, is to him, it's not just these leadership concepts. Leadership is supernatural. And if we get in the spot where leadership is just going through concepts and fulfilling these things and all that, we've taken the supernatural out of the church. We've taken the supernatural out of the business. We might see health, we might see some growth, but we'll never see what God has actually desired and planned for us. Good. Leadership is supernatural every single time. These principles are amazing that we get every Tuesday. But if we take God out of them, we take the supernatural out of them, we'll only see a small picture of what God actually had for us. So those are the two things in my young life of 26 years that I've seen really hamstring people. I've seen leaders stop living by faith, and I've seen them not empower people. And I really believe that the church would be light years beyond where we are. I believe businesses would be light years beyond where they are if they could live in faith and they can empower the right people every single time. That's what I have for you. Does anybody have any questions or comments or thoughts to throw on top of that? I know I'm not that good.
Probably were.
Awesome. I can't see if you're online. Right now we don't have anybody monitoring it. So I'm not being rude. I'm not checking my text messages. I'm actually going to hop on YouTube and see if there were any questions on there so you're not ignored. We value you. An hour out of your day. I know Todd and Julie are normally on there. We love them. Pastor Frank is normally on there. Pastor Treadway always texts me. I love him. Let's see this invite from Pastor Spencer. He always texts me. Oh, anybody else hate their own voice? That's awful. Awesome. Hey guys, before we go, actually, like I just said leadership is supernatural, and I don't want to just say that and throw it out there. I believe that